Welcome to another edition of We the People. Today, our conversation is with constitutional expert, Paul Engel.
Well, it's been a little while since you've been here, but we're glad to sit back down together and glad you could be with us today.
Yeah, things have been busy, but a good busy.
Good busy.
A good busy.
I know you've been doing a lot of traveling and making presentations, and that's good. As you're out fighting the battle to get the Constitution in front of everybody and create some sort of desire out there for people to study and learn for themselves, and we appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
And this, while we're talking about it, I want to make a plug for your book here, The Constitution Study. It's a book that's written by Paul, and it goes in depth into our Constitution. He also has a shorter version of Read the Constitution in 30 Days. I've read that. It's awesome. So if you're interested in that, you can visit Paul's website, constitutionstudy.com, and order one. Or if you know Paul and you see him out and about, ask him. I'm sure he can come up with a copy.
Oh, yeah. I'm always willing.
Well, we're here today, Paul, to talk about parental authority or parental rights.
Right.
There's been a lot of instances come up in our society today that has seemed to violate that. But I want to talk today about the legality of the mandate forced on children. Mm-hmm. Where does that stand as far as becoming reality, as far as you can see, and also what rights do parents have to reject this illegal mandate?
Right. Well, you start right off. It's an illegal mandate. Right? Nothing in the Constitution grants the United States the authority to determine medical decisions for you or for your family. Now, the Supreme Court back in the 1970s, there was a case, I just covered it in a recent article and video, recognizes that for the state to interfere in a family requires there be some actual abuse, there be some actual serious concerns for the child. This comes out of a case called Duchesne versus Sugarman. You can read more about it on the Constitution Study, but in general, the liberty for a family to live the way they want to live without government interference is protected by the 14th Amendment. So when a state comes in and says you have to get a vaccine, all right. Well, my first question is, where are you authorized to make medical decisions for me? In fact, there's even a federal law that says, no, you're not even allowed to know my medical information. If you've ever been to the doctor, you sign that HIPAA form, right?
Right, yeah.
So anybody comes up and asks me if I've been vaccinated, I'm like, and where do I send the FBI for the violation of HIPAA?
Right.
Because that is a violation of federal law.
So let's say a travel passport, a vaccination passport for travel is illegal.
Yes. Because you're doing several things. One is you are violating HIPAA. Now, HIPAA has its own constitutional issues, but HIPAA says that you cannot force me to divulge medical information, which is exactly what you're asking me to do.
Right.
And in fact, there have been recently some rather hilarious situations where some media host asked a person if they had been vaccinated, and the response backs were, well, can I ask you, have you had an STD? Because you're asking for my private medical information. Does that mean I get to ask you private medical information?
Wow. That's a good response.
I like that one. I like that one. But it's private medical information. Now, the mandate part of it all comes down to the 5th and 14th Amendments. Both of them have what's called a due process clause.
Right.
Says you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. Due process is defined as a judicial or governmental process that protects the rights of the individual. So if government is going to deprive you of the liberty to decide for yourself whether or not to take a certain medical product, right? It's not a vaccine. Legally, I think the Johnson & Johnson may be, but Pfizer and Moderna legally are not vaccines. They're genetic therapy.
Okay.
Right? So I tend to avoid using the term vaccine. So if the government's going to say, you must, well, they're depriving you of liberty. They're depriving you of control of your body, which is your property. In the case of a family where they're saying the child must, wait a second, you're depriving me of the liberty to control the upbringing of my child, which is my responsibility. Where is your due process? Where are you showing that you're protecting my rights? Oh, we're trying to keep you healthy. Sorry, it doesn't say healthy.
Right.
You see, the problem is most people assume the government is there to protect us. It is not. We create governments to protect our rights. And when we ask them to protect us, we actually have to give them power over us.
Right.
The ability to make decisions. So when these vaccine mandates come from the fact that for decades now, the American people have said, hands off, government, you go figure it out. We don't want anything to do with it. You treat us like children. And now we're surprised when they actually went ahead and did it.
Yeah. So let's say that this unfolds a few months down the road and our president comes out with the bright idea. The CDC recommends that we do this for our 5 to 12-year-olds, which just got approval. What?
Pfizer for 5 to 11-year-olds.
5 to 11-year-olds.
Yep.
So we go to 5 to 11-year-olds and we say, we're going to vaccine you or you can't come to school.
Okay, well, the first thing you have to ask, is it a public or a private school?
Right.
Right. If it's a private school, it's owned by private individuals. They have a right to control what happens on their property. Right. Same reason, if I come to your house, you can set conditions under which I enter your house. Maybe you want me to take my shoes off. You know, maybe you want me to get vaccinated.
Right.
Right. You have that right. Same with private.
Right. That makes sense.
Public
Okay.
schools.
Right.
They're owned by the public, which means you're part owner of them.
Right.
So first of all, they're saying, okay, well, you're depriving me of my liberty, and you're telling it's to keep you safe. Well, I'm sorry, the evidence shows that the vaccine doesn't keep you safe.
What about keeping everybody else safe?
None of the stuff shows that it keeps everybody else safe. By the way, masks don't work that way either. If you're going to deprive someone of their liberty, you have to protect their rights, which means if you're going to do it, you have to prove that it is A, necessary, and B, the only option, or at least the option is so much better than everything else that would not infringe on your rights, that we have no choice. Well, none of that is true. I just heard Fauci again going, well, we think maybe the third booster shot might give you a longer term. That's not proof.
Man, we've been listening to him think for long enough. Okay.
I pay no attention to what Fauci says. I pay no attention to what the CDC says. Well, you know, was it Weinstein or whatever her name is?
Yeah.
Because I can only be lied to so many times before I just had enough.
Yeah.
But here's the important thing to remember. Both Alexander Hamilton and the Supreme Court agree that any act of Congress, any act of the presidency that is repugnant to the Constitution is void. Now, you're familiar with the Hans Christian Andersen story, right? The Emperor's Clothes.
Right.
But a couple of con men convince him that this clothing is so only magic, only special people can see it.
Right.
Kind of like the vaccine, right? It only works on special people. Only special people can understand this.
Right.
So he goes out wandering around buck naked because he refuses to admit he can't see these clothes. Well, that's very much the situation we have today. These laws, these agendas, these edicts, these mandates, these recommendations have no force of law. They are void because they violate the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. Which means all these people trying to enforce this are effectively running around buck naked.
Okay.
This is my point. My job is to be the character of the kid in the Christian Andersen story, right? What did he do? He points at, he's naked! That's my job. My job is to run around pointing out how naked all of these public officials are so that we can recognize it and act accordingly.
Right.
Now, you mentioned flying. I have not been flying. I used to love flying. I almost became a pilot. But I refuse to trust that either the TSA or these airlines are not going to strand me somewhere if I don't submit to some draconian order that they make me take an experimental drug that's been proven to have serious medical side effects for a disease I have a 99.5% chance of surviving. So if they're going to mandate a vaccine, okay, wait a second. I recently was on the CDC website. The age range from 5 to 11 that they just authorized, the percentage of COVID cases among that age range was something like, I want to say 2.4%.
Yeah.
Do you know what the number of deaths, the percentage of deaths among 5?
It's higher.
No, it's 0.
Oh, I'm talking about deaths from the the danger of the vaccine is more dangerous than the virus,
Well,
based
there's
on their
actually-
own studies.
Yes, yeah, but I'm saying in the 5 to 11-year-olds that they just approved, the percentage of deaths, of all the COVID deaths in that
Right.
age range, 0.
Right.
It rounds to 0. There were, I think, 294 deaths total between the ages of 5 to 11. And for that, we're going to experiment on our children, because these drugs that they authorized, they've issued emergency use authorizations.
Right.
The FDA itself, when they approved and said, yes, we approve this, 2 of the committee members said, listen, we don't know what this is going to do. And one said, we won't know until we actually give it to the kids.
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that the studies that they had done would show a higher mortality rate from the vaccine itself than from the virus.
And we have no clue what the long-term effects are, because there have been no long-term studies. This is, again...
The study is taking place now.
We are the study.
Right.
The Moderna and Pfizer. So there's an interesting one. I believe it was no, it wasn't the Pfizer. What's the cure? The remdesivir.
Yeah.
Remdesivir. Remdesivir is not new. They actually tested it because they thought it'd be a cure for Ebola. Do you know how many people, what the percentage of people in the test case died when they took remdesivir? 55%.
Really?
Yes. Yet that's what the CDC says is the only acceptable treatment for COVID. A treatment that they know kills 55% of the people who take it.
Sounds about right.
And then they go, well, look at our death rates are going up. Yeah, are they dying of COVID or remdesivir?
Yeah, really. It's crazy. I mean, all the numbers and everything have been...
But the point being is, just because the government says something doesn't mean you have to do it. Government cannot force you if you're a free citizen. They can intimidate you, they can bully you, they can threaten you, they can punish you. They cannot force you. And that's the biggest thing, is free citizens recognize we created government, not the other way around. We are their masters, not their servants. And we need to learn to act that way.
Okay, I want you to give some advice to our Board of Education.
Okay.
Let's just say, Board of Education, listen, expert here. All right. We'll define expert later. But vaccine mandate comes out for 5 to 11 years old since it's been proved. And the federal government says, we're going to cut funding to any state or local school district that does not mandate the vaccination for 5 to 11 years old. You got to do this, or you can't attend this public school. What rights do our Bedford County Board of Education have to push back from this local level?
Well, understand, federal funding is a bribe.
Right.
Right? So you're accepting a bribe. I can't sugarcoat it. You are accepting money to change your mind about something. Now, it's an illegal bribe because the federal government is not authorized to be involved in education. There is nothing in the list of powers delegated. So every dollar you get from the Federal Department of Education is an ill-gotten gain that you are accepting to change your mind. So the first thing you have to recognize is, okay, you are currently being bribed, which is the power they're trying to wield over you. Here's the second thing. Now, I'm not an expert in this, but I've done a little bit of research. I've talked to some people. Back when I was more involved in schools, my daughter was of school age, even though we homeschooled her. One of the interesting things I found is, take a look at the cost of implementing the federal mandates that the funds are tied to. Every school I've talked to, when they actually break it down, realize that it costs more for them to implement the mandates from the federal government than they get in dollars from the federal government.
So that's an easy decision.
So simply go, fine, keep your blood money, keep your filthy lucre. We won't implement all of your federal mandates. And 1, we'll be freer. 2, we'll probably be richer. But the problem is they're going to look and say, but we're not getting the money. And I guarantee you that you'll have people in Bedford County hitting the roof because, what do you mean you're not going to take this money? We need this money.
Right.
No, we don't. Schools were started, public schools were started by communities that said, we want to educate our children, we're willing to sacrifice to educate our children, here's how we do it. Let's go back to that. Let's not get the federal entanglement, because the federal entanglement is what's bringing in not just the vaccine mandate, it's bringing in the transgender agenda, it's brought in the homosexual agenda, it's brought in the climate agenda, it's brought in the critical race theory agenda. All of these, are being pushed in part by these federal projects and being funded by federal money. And then anytime a school district or a state says, we don't like that, federal government says, and we're taking our money back. Well, stop being a victim. Take it. We don't want it. And if it means in the short term the citizens of Bedford County will have to cough up a bit more money, that may be in the short run. In the long run, it'll save you money. But mostly, it'll put you back in charge of the school district, which is the way it was supposed to be in the first place.
All right, I'm glad we've talked about this, because it gives us two ways to attack against these illegal mandates. First of all, from an individual parent, and then from our school board.
Understand,
There's two different.
There is no law that requires you to go to a public school.
No, absolutely
No,
not.
there is not. Now, there are laws that say you have to attend some sort of education. But if a public school is truly owned by the public, we should be much more involved in that school board.
And I think we've seen over the past few months pushback from parents, especially in Virginia. That election, that was the agenda that flipped that election.
Loudon, Virginia has been a poster child for parents standing up and retaking control of their school board. Remember, you don't even have to have a child in school. If you pay taxes, you have every legal right to be on the school board and participate with the school board. We need to take it out of the hands of, if I can be kind, trained agitators, people who have been trained in a Marxist philosophy, in a progressive philosophy, in a let's separate the children from the beliefs of their parents. Okay, let's do away with the federal money. We start doing away with that. We need to be in charge. We need to be in control. When I was in 5th grade, my mother volunteered just because she saw the school needed some help. A public school in New York City. Let's be involved.
I think that's the key. I think parents have been things have been hidden from parents intentionally, probably, over the last several years, and COVID allowed them, especially with the at-home schooling online, where you could see the virtual learning. A lot of parents got to see some stuff that they'd never seen before, and I think that opened up some eyes.
Yep.
And I think it's going to continue to be open, and thankfully, our Bedford County Board of Education has not caved to some of this nonsense, and I think we need to stand behind them as long as they keep going down that path.
Absolutely.
So, Paul, I thank you for coming today. I think you've given us a very good battle plan, so to speak, to push against these illegal mandates. But we'll look to come back and talk about some other issues as far as our rights go, these individual rights that we have that are afforded by our Constitution, and look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you for joining us. Look for our next presentation soon. This is a production of Shelbyville Now.